Welcome to the Tennessee Beef Quality Assurance online training. The Tennessee BQA program is offered and managed by the Tennessee Cattlemen's Association. The educational materials are developed and delivered in partnership with UT Extension beef cattle specialists in the University of Tennessee Department of Animal Science and county agricultural and natural resources agents across the state.
So we're going to go over the importance of the BQA, and we talked a little bit about this before. Food safety and herd health, in-product quality, low-stress handling, trailer safety, and then just being able to expertly tell our story. That's the biggest challenge that I think the beef industry has. It's coming up with a common story that, that brings in the audience, that is appealing to the general public. So these are few of the topics that came through on the last beef quality assurance audit, and so we want to make sure that we address these moving forward. So we'll understand the importance of the beef quality assurance program, and then hopefully learn some basic goals of the program.
Beef quality assurance was developed to ensure that beef and dairy cattle are managed in a manner that will result in safe and wholesome beef products for the consumer. This statement is not only the definition, but also the overall goal of BQA. The consumer drives demand. The level of consumer confidence in beef products significantly affects consumer eating habits and impacts the future of our industry. Consumer confidence is essential if we are to stake our claim in the meat case. More specifically, BQA is designed to enhance carcass quality by preventing drug residues, injection site blemishes, and bruises in beef cuts. The Tennessee Beef Quality Assurance Program is based on recommended national guidelines that are guided by scientific research. All sectors of the industry, from seed stock, cow-calf, heifer growers, and dairy producers, to stocker operators, backgrounders, cattle feeders, and points of sale and harvest, must take responsibility for the production of a safe food product. This is accomplished through proper animal care, handling, and management practices. This program provides knowledge and tools that enable beef and dairy producers to enhance their product, maximize marketability, and strengthen consumer confidence. Beyond food safety, the economic importance of BQA can be seen when analyzing the most important quality challenges in the production of beef. The 2000 National Beef Quality Audit showed that the industry lost an average of $100 for every fed steer or heifer marketed. A new beef quality audit is initiated every few years to make sure the industry keeps pace with changes in consumer demand. In 3 of the audits, defects in the hide and lack of uniform size of ribeye and other cuts of meat were identified. In the 2005 National Beef Quality Audit, inadequate tenderness, excessive external fat, insufficient marbling, and excess carcass or cut weights were identified as the major factors affecting meat quality. For the first time, the 2005 National Beef Quality Audit identified individual cattle traceability and the need for instrument grading, clearer market signals, and communication among sectors as areas that the industry must address. In the 2016 audit, 32% of fed cattle and 63% of non-fed cattle had bruises compared to 34% and 85% respectively in the 2011 audit. The economic loss to the industry in 2016 due to bruises was estimated at $1.90 per head, an estimated total of $5.5 million. In 2011, that number was estimated at $6.7 million. All meat industries face similar concerns. By following BQA guidelines and management practices, beef and dairy producers increase the value of beef products in the eyes of the consumers while enhancing their stewardship of natural and financial resources. This diagram illustrates a general overview of the movement of cattle through the conventional beef production chain. Beginning with commercial cow-calf ranches, females are bred to produce a calf each year, and that calf is maintained on the cow until weaning. Bull calves are usually castrated at or before weaning and move on to the next phase. A percentage of heifers that meet the quality standards are usually retained and developed as replacements for mature cows that need to be removed from the herd. Heifers that do not meet the quality standards to be retained move on to the next phase. Calves leaving a cow-calf operation with the intentions of being harvested are usually referred to as feeder calves and range from 4 to 9 months of age. It is important to realize that revenue from cull cows and bulls make up a significant percentage of a cow-calf operation's income each year. The more modern term for culls is non-fed cows and bulls because they reach maturity while being maintained for reproduction and did not go through the finishing phase.
So we're trying to learn management practices to improve the herd health and then learn the proper intermuscular shot placement, which we've talked about this for 20 years.
Establishing a herd health plan will help decrease the risk of food safety and beef quality defects. A year-round management calendar is a good tool. UT Extension Beef IRM calendars are available annually through your local extension agent. The calendar shows dates recommended for major herd activities as well as suggestions for pasture and crop management.
So just for everybody's sake, we have these calendars in the office, as well as we'll send that link out that you can access. Of course, this year is coming to a close, but we will have some new calendars probably coming in about December for the upcoming year. This is one of those things that you said, what are 3 things that you want to have in your truck? This will be one of them. It's a great decision-making tool.
Accurate record keeping is the foundation of a good herd health plan. This is especially useful when an annual review of the cow herd is being performed. Having records on individual animals helps you determine if cows are working for you or if you are working for your cows. It is critically important to record all treatments of individual cattle and groups of cattle. Click on the notepad icon to see examples of information you should record on a treatment sheet. A good herd health plan includes a variety of animal health management practices. This section outlines the components of a good herd health plan. Deworming your herd correctly includes providing the correct dosage. Inadequate doses of dewormers will promote resistance. Good biosecurity practices can help promote and prevent diseases. When bringing new animals into a herd, it is always a good idea to quarantine them for at least 2 weeks. Animals tested positive for chronic diseases should be culled from the herd. Routine vaccinations are essential. It is important to properly store and label all vaccination containers. Proper needle safety and cleaning will be addressed in the next slide. Managing external parasites is a vital part of your herd's health. Bloodborne diseases can be spread rapidly from animal to animal with more flies and ticks present. The body condition of cattle will deteriorate when extra energy is being used to swat flies. Have an external parasite plan in place well before the season begins. Consult your local veterinarian to ensure the appropriate product is being used. Using the same external parasite control year after year will promote resistance. Utilizing a defined calving season will allow for better use of management practices such as vaccination and adequate feeding. If an expected calving date is known, it is more likely that assistance will be available for a cow or heifer who needs it during the birthing process. Routine pregnancy checks are an important part of maintaining a defined breeding and calving season. Use disposable needles and syringes. Heat sterilize reusable equipment such as repeater syringes by cleaning with boiling water. Do not clean injection equipment with disinfectant. This can render vaccines useless and may potentially reduce the effectiveness of other medications. The withdrawal time is defined as the period of time that must pass after the last dose is given until harvest of the animal. Drug residue in livestock products must be avoided. Customers are concerned about the drugs used in dairy and livestock production and how they affect the food they eat. The industry can address these concerns by assuring consumers that the necessary steps are taken to prevent drug residues. Consumers expect zero tolerance. Residue violations and condemnations can be avoided by taking the following actions. Maintain individual animal identification and keep complete medical records for at least 2 years. Properly store, label, and account for all medication. Use animal health products according to the label. Maintain a valid veterinary client-patient relationship, or VCPR, by visiting with your veterinarian at least annually. And educate all employees and family members about your control systems, emphasizing the importance of keeping drug residues out of the human food chain. Based on the 2000 National Beef Quality Audit, injection site blemishes or lesions cost the beef industry $188 million annually. This means that producers lost an average of roughly $7 per head each year from the potential value of the steers and heifers they marketed. Research sponsored by the NCBA on behalf of the Beef Checkoff demonstrated a negative relationship between meat tenderness and injection sites, including those injection sites that had no visible lesions. Furthermore, the researchers concluded that intramuscular injections, including sterile water, create permanent damage, regardless of the age of the animal at the time the product was given. At the very least, tenderness is reduced in a 3-inch area surrounding the injection site.
With the hesitation of going down some muddy waters, I hope that we've got to the point where everybody knows that that little triangle section in this following link in the neck is about the only place that you need to be giving any type of shock. So hopefully we'll cover it right here.
To reduce injection site defects in economically important cuts of beef, the preferred site for all subcutaneous and intramuscular injections is the neck region. It is particularly important to use the neck region with intramuscular products because even the shoulder chuck primal contains value-added cuts that should be protected. Whenever possible, choose products formulated and labeled for subcutaneous rather than intramuscular injection. Subcutaneous injections are administered just under the skin, instead of into the muscle tissue, by inserting the needle at a 45-degree angle. Intramuscular injections are made directly into muscle tissue of the neck. Absorption of the drug is more rapid in the muscle than under the skin because it comes into direct contact with blood delivered to the muscle tissue. After the injection site is chosen, distract the animal by slapping the injection site firmly. Immediately insert the needle with a quick thrust. Broken or bent needles should never be used to give an injection. Also, bent needles should never be straightened and reused. To prevent the spread of blood-borne infectious diseases, use a new needle for each animal. This may seem time-consuming and expensive, but the loss of just one animal from a blood-borne disease is much more expensive than the cost of new needles and the time taken to change between each animal. Even if animals are not lost by the spread of disease by using a single needle on multiple animals, you are virtually certain to lose gain in your calf crop and have fewer calves from your mature cows and heifers. Again, using a needle on each animal might seem expensive and take a little extra effort, but in this case, cheap and easy equals less revenue and more work down the road.
So the correct answer is if you ever speak to Dr. Lou Strickland, who was our speaker last week, and you ask him a question, the correct answer is, yes, sir, I replace my needles every time.
A drug usually requires veterinary prescription, indicated by RX on the label, when it has significant potential for toxicity in humans or animals, when it might have a unique method of use, or if its use requires other special considerations. Such products can only be used or dispensed by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian, and the label must contain the notation, "Caution, federal law restricts this drug to use by or on the order of a licensed veterinarian." Over-the-counter drugs can be purchased from multiple sources and must be used as directed on the label. For example, Most over-the-counter procaine penicillin G products are labeled for use at 1 cc per hundredweight to be administered via intramuscular injection. So, a 600-pound calf would be given a 6 cc intramuscular injection. Producers are not allowed to change the dose or give the drug by any other route of administration. Extra label treatments may only be administered by or under the supervision of a licensed veterinarian and within the scope of a valid VCPR. A valid VCPR, or veterinary client-patient relationship, exists when the veterinarian has assumed the responsibility for making clinical judgments regarding the health of the animals and the need for medical treatment, and the client, owner, or caretaker has agreed to follow the veterinarian's instructions. The veterinarian is readily available or has arranged for emergency coverage for follow-up evaluation in the event of adverse reactions or failure to the treatment regime. And the veterinarian has sufficient knowledge of the animals to initiate at least a general or preliminary diagnosis of the medical conditions of the animals. This means that the veterinarian has recently seen or is personally acquainted with the keeping and care of the animals by virtue of an examination of the animals or by medically appropriate and timely visits to the premises where the animals are kept.
And this is the big part, learning what the consumers want on the eating experience. And that's the biggest challenge that we have to remember as cow-calf producers, really any producers at all, but cow-calf producers, because we're so far from the person actually eating that steak on their plate, is remembering that whatever we do in the pastures today has to be a positive reflection on that eating experience on that steak. So there's a lot of things that we can do to improve that. We always tend to think that it's always, all those changes are done at the feedlot, but a lot of them are determined with the genetics we select and the way we get some of our calves off to start in life. A lot of that is determined at what we do in the cow-calf field.
Consider what makes a good eating experience. Eating experience is impacted by portion size, tenderness, palatability, minimum excess fat on the cuts, consistency, and uniformity of the product presented to the consumer. Think about what cow-calf producers can do to affect the quality of beef. As these genetic and selection changes in targeted breeding are made, consider the time it takes for these changes to impact beef products. Essentially, 2 years will pass from the time a breeding decision is made, cows go through gestation, and their calves go through the production phases in the beef industry until that final protein product is presented to consumers. Be very diligent and thoughtful about breeding decisions. Ask yourself this question: would you eat what you produce? Then raise all cattle with the intent that they will eventually be consumed as a food product.
This is the biggest challenge that you see, and we'll get talking about this in the next few slides, why the beef industry has the biggest challenge when you look between the poultry and the swine or pork industry is, for one, is the length of time it takes to make decisions for what type of product and experience that the consumer wants. And the fact that the poultry and the pork are vertically integrated, and that one person can make a decision and change the entire product line or the type of body or whatever genetic trait that they're looking for in the pork and poultry areas, and they can make those changes pretty quick. Obviously, in the beef industry, we're not vertically integrated, so there's quite a few people involved in these decision-making processes. And in time you collect the data, there's quite a bit of time that goes between when that decision is made, that there's an experience that needs to change, when you can actually see that end product on the table again. So there's some challenges that come with the beef industry trying to meet the experience that the customers are wanting. We'll talk about that as we go.
By targeting the production of optimum carcass characteristics, beef cattle producers affect the amount of beef consumed in relation to other protein sources. The per capita meat consumption of pounds of boneless beef has declined in recent years and is currently projected to continue its decline. Poultry products are taking over a portion of that beef share, with pork remaining stable. By adhering to the production of carcass characteristic targets described here, you can produce beef that consumers desire, and these trends could be changed to benefit beef cattle producers. Genetic selection is a powerful tool for producing a consistent and palatable product for the consumer. This goes hand in hand with the evaluation of live animals. Uniformity in cow herds is needed to help achieve genetic selection goals. With bull selection, avoid extremes in any one trait and target moderation. This is important for efficient production of a desirable product. Consider industry changes and the time lag between implementation of the genetic change to when the product reaches the consumer. With regard to replacement females, evaluate maternal traits as well as performance to retain good brood cows that will stay in the herd through many calving cycles. Also, manage calving interval by shortening the calving season to better manage and produce a more uniform product. One of the most powerful tools available for genetic selection decisions is expected progeny differences, most often referred to as EPDs. These are used to estimate how the offspring of an individual will compare to the offspring of another individual or group of individuals within a breed. Use EPDs to directly compare cattle within a breed and identify traits needing genetic changes. Then implement genetic changes using these EPDs. Another useful tool is live animal ultrasound. This technology provides an indication of the carcass characteristics of an animal without having to first harvest it. Use live animal ultrasound evaluation of yearling cattle to examine the amount of marbling in the ribeye muscle and at the 12th and 13th ribs. Use it to look at size of the ribeye and also to estimate the fat measurement over the 12th and 13th ribs. This information can then be applied in targeted breeding decisions to change the beef product presented to consumers. First, consider the size and type of cattle to be produced. Think about marketing to a window of acceptability with regard to live cattle characteristics. The most important live cattle characteristic is that they be between 1,000 and 1,350 pounds at maturity. This produces beef carcasses within the optimal size range of consumer acceptability. Cattle should be classified as a USDA muscling score of 1 or 2, and they should have a back fat thickness over the 12th and 13th ribs between 3/10 and 4/500 inch at the end of finishing. When making changes to cattle size and type, set target size as a tangible goal to work toward with regard to weight, frame size, and body type. Strive for consistency within cow herds. That, in turn, translates to consistency within calf crops. When evaluating cattle size and type, a couple of tools are available to use for live cattle evaluations. One of these tools is the USDA frame size grade, and the other is the USDA muscle score grade. The frame score basically indicates a growth pattern of the cattle and is related to slaughter weights at which cattle will obtain the target amount of back fat thickness. A smaller frame calf will reach that target at a smaller weight and size than a larger frame calf. The larger frame calf will take a longer time in the feeding phase to reach that endpoint, will reach it at heavier weight, and will yield a heavier carcass. A medium frame score will be the intermediate of those two.
So just a little bit to add here, we have a great session coming up, I think towards the end of all of our sessions in November, covering genetics with our new leader for our beef genomic lab that we have, which is really going to produce, I think, a lot of high quality information for the nation over the coming years. But looking at genetics, that's one of them that maybe as an industry, we push really hard calving ease bulls, and really the most important trait being getting a calf on the ground, and that is one of the most important traits. But we have so many calves now and so many quality genetic animals that maybe some of us start to sacrifice a little too much in making sure that we have the lowest calving ease bull. and genetics that we start to sacrifice some of these traits that we're talking about right here. We forget what the end product needs to be, which is a quality carcass animal that, for the most part, depending on what you're doing, but if you're a commercial operation, you're trying to produce a quality carcass animal that's going to go into the food chain. And so you sacrifice a lot of these traits that maybe some of the buyers are looking for when you start looking at carcass weight, back fat thickness, some of the meat characteristics of it. So something to consider as you go through your operation over the next few years is looking at your calving ease bulls. And so looking at something that's not just purely calving ease, but that make sure that they are balanced in some of their traits, or make sure you're looking for a balanced bull that would fit your operation for being both calving ease, because you have some heifers, as well as having some of those terminal characteristics of getting into the carcass qualities. So that's something to look at as you move forward. Obviously, it's not one size fits all for the bulls, but be looking at that as an opportunity to increase some of the gains for some of your animals, making that change right there. But these characteristics you're seeing right here, that comes right back to eating experience. If you get a carcass weight, if you're getting your cattle are a large frame size, and you're getting calves that are going to start to not really finish until they're 1,400, 1,600 pounds, you're starting to talk about a carcass weight that's over 1,000 pounds. And if you've been to any one of these food or the processing plants, you'll notice they're pretty uniform. And so you put a 1,000-pound carcass on there, and all of a sudden it doesn't fit very well. It doesn't go from station to station to station very well, and it kind of messes up some of their things that they're doing in the plant. So they're going to discount you pretty hard if you're coming in with those bigger carcasses. Obviously, back fitness, it's going to cost you extra money. It costs the feedlot owner extra money because the processing plant's got to cut off more fat. Getting into yield grades. The ribeye area, if you've ever been to one of those Texas places about eating 72-ounce steak, that's one thing. But for the most part, if you're a consumer going into a nice steakhouse, you don't want to be eating a massive steak. It just doesn't look good when the steak covers your entire plate. You want to eat a nice uniform steak that falls within that 11 to 15 square inches. And most of the time it's going to be a little bit smaller. So a lot of these are about making sure that we're meeting what the consumer wants in the end.
Market cows and bulls generate about 70 to 75% of non-fed beef. That is, beef not harvested from conventionally finished cattle. These cattle are often referred to as cull animals, but they are truly market animals that are part of the food supply. Important food items are produced from market cows and bulls, including roasts, steaks, fajitas, and ground beef. In addition, market cows and bulls are very important to producer profitability, accounting for about 15 to 20% of producer income. A good way to start responsible culling is by giving the herd a performance review. Consider cattle as employees and review these employees on a regular basis. Start with these checkpoints: eyes, mouth, feet and legs, udder, body condition score, disposition, reproductive performance, and disease control. Many culling management points can impact public perception. For example, cancer eye is something very visible to the public that can be identified when checking eyes. Lumpy jaw is another very visible example when checking the mouth. With regard to feet and legs, lameness is important to check to make sure cattle are sound and can properly function. Of utmost importance, do not allow downer cattle to continue in cattle marketing channels. After reviewing these checkpoints on responsible culling to improve herd productivity and efficiency, remember that cows and bulls are a very important part of the beef supply chain. These non-fed cattle are truly market cows and bulls. It is important to properly manage things like injection sites, the way vaccines and medicines are administered, and adherence to proper withdrawal times. Always adequately feed cows and bulls because bruising occurs more readily in emaciated cattle.
Something to look at is kind of think of this in a sports reference, but it's about talking about, you never hear about an athlete retiring too early. Very, very rarely do you hear about it. it's usually they hung on about a year too long. And so, if you're managing a team, if somebody hangs on a year too long, then you're paying them a lot of money to do something that they did really well, last year or a few years ago. So if you look at it, if you call them a year too early, then all you're losing is the difference between the quality of that calf and the quality of that replacement calf. If you call them a year too late, you're potentially looking at an animal that you just paid to maybe not give you a calf at all. So you're talking about a difference between no calf at all and the replacement is not there because they are the replacement. So when looking at this, think about it as, think about it as your sports reference. You can use the New England Patriots if you want, but thinking about it, you're not losing as much if you call a year early versus if you call a year late.
Chapter 4, Low Stress Handling. Cattle producers have long recognized the importance of proper livestock management. Sound animal care, handling, and biosecurity practices are based on practical experience, sound science, and animal behavior research. These practices impact all aspects of cattle production, including animal health and welfare, reproductive performance, nutritional efficiencies and productivity, as well as enhance beef quality and producer profitability. Low-stress handling starts long before entering the herd. These practices begin with an understanding of animal selection based on temperament. Docility EPDs, or expected progeny differences, are available within all major breeds and should be utilized to impact this heritable trait when selecting our next herd sire. Culling of those cows and heifers which display aggression or excessive flight responses should also be culled from the herd. Agriculture is unique and a special industry that utilizes the entire family to support the labor and management needs of these very diverse and technical operations. The age ranges from very young, ages 5 to 14, and the more senior, ages 65 to 80. And all these groups provide a very useful and much needed purpose within the functioning of these beef cattle operations. It is for this reason that low stress handling of livestock is so very critical. The majority of injuries and fatalities within agriculture are in these two categories of age. Thus, safety for both handler and the livestock are the initial and foremost reasons to practice proper handling. In addition to the benefits associated with productivity and safety, by imparting a low-stress environment to the handling activities of gathering, pinning, sorting, and processing our herds, it is that we are promoting a safer and more enjoyable experience for both the family and the crew working with the livestock. The effect of this yields a higher likelihood that producers will take advantage of herd improvement practices that can bring cost benefits and genetic improvement to our herds. Off as slow and easy as possible. So I've got two that walk by. I'm going to give 90-43 an opportunity to walk by, and I'm going to go ahead and take the baldy. So we've got 4 head. Another thing you want to pay attention to, you can't have too many gates in a working facility. So you want to take the opportunity to utilize gates if you have them available to you. So we take these heifers on into the opening of the bud box, okay? We shut the bud box gate behind us, okay? Try not to make too much noise. Okay, so the purpose of a bud box are for these heifers to see that they have nowhere to go, and then to turn and to find an exit route. And do you see how easy these heifers are moving up into this design? Okay, so it might be the situations where I find out, oh, well, no, 4 will fit up in there. And then you just close that gate. Okay. So that really worked very smoothly. And that's the ideal way to work cattle through the bud box design. Now you can see my guess was exactly right, but I will tell you this. Next time I'm only going to bring 3. because whenever you're bringing cattle in, you don't want it completely full. You would rather have room for one more head. Now, if the gate in front that Hugh, and I'll introduce Hugh Moorhead, he's a long-time employee here. He really manages the facilities on all of Amtrak Lewisburg's facilities, and he's our #1 gate man. And so if that gate was open and we had that available for them to step into, then 4 would have been the perfect number, right, Hugh? Okay, having it the way it is, 3 is probably the perfect number. So let's illustrate that one more time. So if you want to let these on out, Hugh, we'll and find you a pen up there somewhere, and we'll go ahead and run through this one more time. This concept deals with the flight zones, or pressure points. An important concept of livestock handling is the animal's flight zone, or personal space. Understanding the flight zone can reduce stress and help prevent accidents. The size of the flight zone varies depending on how accustomed the cattle are to their current surroundings and the handlers. The edge of the flight zone can be determined by simply approaching the animal or the herd. By entering this zone, we are adding pressure and initiating the movement away from the pressure we are causing. This pressure influences the animal's natural comfort level. The more pressure the handler causes, the more rapid the animal or herd will move away. Low-stress handling centers around the proper use of this pressure by placing ourselves in the appropriate position to initiate forward movement at a slow rate of speed, desirably a walk. As discussed earlier, utilizing the animal's shoulder as the point of balance or pivot point to control forward and backward movement is both beneficial within close confinement and the open pasture. Additionally, to establish movement and change directional movement of the herd, it is critical to identify the pivot point of the herd, not just the individual. Some of the events that cause stress in our herd are sorting. So whenever we gather our cattle, one of the things that we can do to improve the way they handle is by sorting our cows and calves. And go ahead and pull those calves off. What that will do is prevent injury to those smaller calves, and it will also facilitate the movement through the pen by causing a draw. So we can pull our calves off and place them in a pen to allow the cows to flow through better, being drawn to the balling of their calves. Chapter 5, Transporting Cattle. In this chapter, you will learn the regulations associated with cattle movement, as well as safe loading and unloading practices. Loading and unloading should be done slowly and quietly. The fastest way to work cattle is as slow as possible. Load heavier cattle towards the front of the trailer and minimize the height they must step up by backing into a slope. Minimizing stress while loading cattle is the key. Beef quality assurance programs require that animals be handled in a manner that will result in a high-quality product for our consumers. Transporting animals from farm to farm or to the market must not jeopardize the quality of product we have worked so hard to produce. Also, there is an economic incentive to properly transporting our animals. Cattle that are injured will sell for less. So taking steps to prevent injury in transit can result in a higher selling price. Similarly, cattle that are injured or bruised will have a greater degree of trim loss. This is particularly true for market or cull cows and bulls, which usually do not have enough fat cover to help prevent a degree of bruising. Animals suffering from weather-related stress will be more susceptible to disease. Taking care to follow these recommended transportation practices can result in higher beef quality, less trim loss, and fewer injuries. and a more profitable and productive operation.
So these are just a few of the guidelines that you have to manage. And of course, obviously a little bit changed when we started talking about some of the trucking regulations that came through, they're probably 5 years ago. But then started getting into official identification and being able to transport across state lines. And this is the important part that we have to get used to is being able to brag on ourselves, being able to tell the things that we're doing. Because if we let somebody else tell the story of what we're doing, they don't do a very good job. And you guys have heard enough of this between the media and things that you just hear out in public. And so we need to be able to tell our story because people are willing to listen. I think we're just not the loudest voices.
If we don't tell the true story about how beef is produced, others will tell their version, and it might not reflect the true nature of the industry. News and social media are full of terms like factory farm, sustainability, and inhumane. Those words are often used to discourage the uninformed consumer from eating beef. One of the most effective ways to stop the spread of misinformation is to be accessible to the people in your community so they can see that cattle producers are concerned about the welfare of their cattle and conserving the environment to provide opportunities for future generations of cattle producers. Some cattle producers have a knack for effective communication with larger audiences and help counter misinformation on a broader scale. But you don't have to be a popular social media figure to improve the reputation of beef.
I think one of the important things to look at is that don't mistake ignorance for a lack of wanting to understand, especially in the communities that we live in Middle Tennessee. We live in some of these communities where I think you have a general public that for the most part wants information. They want to understand. And so, if we just allow them to have a Google search, we're not going to show up on the top of the Google search, and they're going to get informed by somebody else. But if we're up front, as we're standing in farmers markets, as we're standing at the Williamson County Fair or at the, any other fair, right? We're standing trying to sell our product, or if you're just out and about telling your story about why you do certain things, and they understand, I think you'll have a lot of people that have a better understanding and will be another voice for us.
More good can be done with tens of thousands of cattle producers across Tennessee taking every opportunity to set the record straight with the people that trust them in their extended families and local communities. Some people ask questions because they truly want to learn, while others ask questions to make a point or bait you into an argument. Arguments rarely change perceptions, and they often do more harm than good. To avoid arguments that have the potential to discredit your positive influence on the perception of the beef you produce, consider this simple series of steps when opportunities for advocacy arise. First, try to determine if the person asking questions about the beef industry sincerely wants to hear your side of the story. If it seems like they are more interested in proving an opinion they already hold, you might want to consider whether engaging with them is worth the effort. On the other hand, if they are sincerely interested in learning more, offer your first-hand experience in beef cattle production. You can also share resources that are based on unbiased scientific research and offer to answer more questions, or even invite them to visit your farm to experience the truth behind how you care for your cattle.
Congratulations. We have made it through a second time. For those that joined us for the second time, looks like technology cooperated with us. I'm going to stop the recording